Welcome, everybody, to the Mike on Mike show yet again. Please go to the Mike on Mike Facebook page, like and follow that page. That helps the algorithm get things out, and you get early notification that there are videos, new videos out there. Once again, Simon Hare. This seems like deja vu.
We're clearly in cahoots because we're wearing the same style shirt.
Yeah, right. He got the memo. I'm the one who wrote the memo, just so you know.
I can read.
You know, he was not dictating to me. I did to him.
I can read.
No, anyway.
Here's the uniform.
It's totally by chance. So, Simon, you're running for something, and it seems like I just interviewed you about running for something.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
So you're running now for treasurer. First of all, why the change? And then we'll get into like the new position.
The backstory is pretty simple. I don't know why people are making such a big deal out of it. I do make good decisions. In fact, I haven't heard a whole lot of people complain about the 8 years of being a county commissioner and making decisions on the board. And so this last little stint, there's a rationale behind it. I think you should probably default to that if I do something. There's probably a reason. And so there was. When I filed for the position 2, I was filing to show intent that I was serious about the role of filling in on the board for the vacancy that Chris Barnett left when he was recalled. But he voluntarily resigned early. You know, he still was recalled, and that was certified. But I was taken a little bit off guard because, you know, it's usually the first 5 days of the recall petition being certified that the commissioners has the discretion to withdraw, to resign. And so I drove the truck in and filed. But before that, I had talked to Wally Hicks about whether or not it was a 2 or 4 year position. The charter clearly states several times that the commissioners are elected for 4-year terms. It doesn't say anything about a recall or whatever. If it's an election in a general year, you're it. And so Rhiannon informed me that it was a 2-year based on ORS 204.010. And I didn't really understand that. And I filed. And then I came back and I said, no, you know, I know how hard a campaign can be sometimes. And so I said, well, if I'm going to do a campaign, I might as well get 4 years out of it instead of 2. And so I withdrew, thinking I might file for position 1. And I came home and I talked to my team, and they said, no, it doesn't matter. Just file for position 2. You know, really what you're interested in is filling in for that 1-year stint. I looked at Mr. Smith as, you know, he'd just gotten there, barely been there a little over a year, never really experienced any challenges or whatever. And I know what that's like. My freshman year, Dwight Ellis had resigned in April. Sandy was recalled in the fall. And so I'm a freshman at 32, and I'm running a county all by myself with no leadership that's been there a long time. And so it's nice to have somebody there who kind of knows a little bit of the history. And like, yeah, don't do that because we did that in 2005 and blah, blah, blah. It didn't go real well. You can do it this way, and this works better. And so having somebody there to shepherd you was all my intent was. And then the elected officials made a different decision and stuff, and we'll see how that plays out. But now I'm running for treasurer. There's a lot of reasons, but it really comes down to, I think, transparency and experience. I think there's something that could be brought to the role, having a commissioner sit in that seat and somebody who's been through the budget. I sat through 400 weekly business sessions. I've done 8 budgets. I've appropriated over $1 billion in that 8 years that I was there. And not that a treasurer has direct influence over those things, but I think just being in the building could affect the board and what it does and all the other elected officials and their programs, just by having somebody with that experience in the county courthouse.
Okay, so what does a treasurer do? You know, I mean, people, you think like, oh, he's the guy who holds the keys to the safe or
Yeah.
or whatever, or he's, you know, glorified accountant or whatever. They don't really know what that is.
Right.
I don't really totally know what that is.
Well,
what is it?
Part of it's defined by state statute, but some of it could be done based on who's sitting in the seat. I don't suspect that John Harrelson did the job the way Eve Arce did the job, the way Mark DeYoung did the job, the way Dustin's doing the job currently. There probably are nuances to it. I think having experience in investments, that's a big part of it. So $106 million, there's 47,200 tax bills that the tax collector facilitates issuing and receiving that cash, those monies come into the county for all of the taxing districts. So I think we have 14 in Josephine County now with the new patrol district. And so you facilitate all those funds, and you also do payables. You send the checks out for the finance department when the board issues a contract. They send it through finance. It goes through the treasurer's office, and they send out a check. And so they work with financial institutions. They invest those dollars that we aren't spending in a liquid fashion. There's the local government investment pool that returns on those dollars. And
okay, so does the treasurer make a recommendation to the commissioners to make an investment in something, and they okay it, or do they just have carte blanche to do that themselves?
The board actually sets the investment policy for the county, and the treasurer implements investments based on that and state statute.
I see.
So,
but are you sitting there in the room when they're discussing this thing, throwing your 2 cents into the mix or something?
The board, I was never involved in making any kind of a decision on that, and I think that there's a little lack of transparency now. Like, I remember when I was on the board, I used to get quarterly reports from John Harrelson and Eve Arcee, and I thought those were being presented on some sort of a public domain, like a website or something. And I went on the county's treasurer's website, and there's very little there. It talks about there's $106 million. Boy, it's not very much. And I think transparency is huge. I'm a transparency absolutist. I mean, it's the public's money. There's only a handful of things that actually should be kept confidential, but it's always in the best interest of the citizens that, like litigation or something, right. Until it's resolved, it really shouldn't be, you don't want to put the county at risk on a real estate transaction or something about, hey, this is how much we're willing to spend on buying this property or selling a piece of property. That doesn't serve the best interest of the citizens. And so HR matters, certain human resource things. Union negotiations are not public until they're done, but there's very few things that I think should be kept confidential. And I think there's a lot of room for improved transparency in the treasurer's office, which is something I want to bring to the table.
And so how do you feel about what's going on currently there? Are there holes in that picture to you, or? There
is. Like, you can do a little bit of digging on the website, and there's really nothing to show for it. One of the things that I want to talk about is, like, why does Simon think he can be the treasurer? Well, I think out of all of I'm the longest serving county commissioner in Josephine County who's alive right now. Harold Haugen did 22 years. I did 8 and stuff. But I also served during the most fiscally challenging situation in maybe any county in Oregon. So I was forced to lay off, make budget reductions. We did, we took the county down to 278 from 454 employees in pretty much 1 year. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but my predecessor had some things right. And when he was campaigning, he said that it's mostly an administrative position, and it really is. It's less a politician in politics and more about how are you at, fiscal management. And he actually wasn't very good at that, I found out. I didn't know at the time, but when I came into office, we were broke. We had no money. We were borrowing money to make payroll. And I don't think the county it should operate that way. I think somebody in the treasurer's office with that kind of experience saying, hey, we don't want to do 2012 again. So here are some missteps that I think led us to 2012. And, spending money like we're printing it in the basement is a rumor I've heard. And I'd love to I think transparency is the best medicine for people speculating, well, the county has tons of money, they just spend it wrong. Well, why don't we just show people where we spend the money? How much we have is discretionary.
Right, yeah.
Where it goes and
then you can
why.
make your own judgment about it. Now, I remember seeing this from the outside, and I don't remember being greatly affected by that. And I've said that publicly and been criticized for it. Because apparently that the sheriff's department suffered some cutbacks in there that were
So you don't feel like you were negatively impacted by those what were called draconian reductions?
Yeah, I wasn't, because here, I'll tell you, I mean, I live in the rural county.
Sure.
And I do not expect, first of all, I think I've seen the sheriff on my street once.
Right.
I've been here 22 years.
Yeah.
And it's a quiet neighborhood. We don't need them for the most part. Now, there was a burglary that happened down around the corner, but that was because one of the residents let slip to somebody that they were going to be on vacation. They were going to be snowbirding in Arizona or something.
Right.
And so these people brought in like a moving van and just unloaded their house.
Sure.
Yeah. And
it's good advice to don't post pictures while you're on vacation that you're not at home.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That's not
I
wise.
don't do it. We do that after we get back. And
well, you bring up a really interesting point about the cuts that we made and whether or not they had an impact on the people. I thought about why don't we do a survey in the tax bills? Like I said, there's about 47,000 that go out. We work for the voters, but the taxpayers pay the freight. And I want to do a one-page survey that goes out in every tax bill that says, did you have an interaction with Josephine County this year in planning, in parks, in the fairgrounds, at the sheriff's office, in patrols or animal control? And how did it go? Can you tell us a little bit about it? And if we had even 1/10, of a small percentage of people who responded to that, who could tell us what's really going on, because listening to the 3 minutes of the weekly business session, that does not give you an insight into what's going on in Josephine County. I asked 12 non-binding questions when I was on the board. I wanted to know what the voters thought, and it's basically free. Like if there's space, the clerk tells you, hey, we got a little bit of space at the end of the ballot. Why can't you do it? I always asked.
Yeah, might as well.
Might as well. It doesn't cost us very much. And so if we had that in the tax bill, we could be telling, the tax collector, the treasurer, who could refer that to the board, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what the citizens are thinking. And, the taxpayers, the people who are writing a check, and they're kind of bitter. I get it. Am I getting the bang for the buck here? Well, but if we had that kind of a report card for the last 10 years and we did those cuts in 2012 and nobody said anything about whatever. Now we don't have the juvenile shelter was shuttered.
Yes.
The detention facility, we were outsourcing that to Douglas County.
Right.
We want that back, whether any taxpayer says, no, I didn't have an impact by the shelter being closed.
If you go from 450 to 278 and there was or wasn't any negative effect from that,
right,
you would certainly want to know that. And I understand when you're sequestered in your office downtown, you don't really know what's happening on the outside.
And most commissioners spend most of their time in their office.
Right. And so
they don't get out.
And so you perceive,
right,
oh, things are really bad right now because we don't have that much money.
Right.
But how is the citizen being affected by that? You know what?
Because we didn't make any cuts in public works. If you're really caring about your road or whatever, we didn't make any cuts there. And public health is funded by the state. We didn't make any cuts in that program, or community corrections is funded by the state.
Bottom line, what my concern is that, maybe 278 is too low, but I want to know where adequate is in that spectrum,
right?
Because I don't mind paying for government. That's, I don't have a choice. I'm going to pay for government, but I would rather that they were only paying for what we need, not necessarily what they want. And I understand that there may be affiliations within the county or within the city or wherever where people who are in charge feel bad for Joe from such and such department, and they'd like to make sure and hire him back as soon as more money comes in. But that isn't what government's about, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not here to make a fantastic circumstance for employees. I'm here to pay for the services that are needed,
right,
and not more than that.
And we hardly ever ask the citizens about what it is they truly want. It's inherited. It feels good to maintain this level of staffing and that size of a budget. And I don't know that really reflects what the citizens are really interested. And, this 58 cents that you pay, that's almost, I don't even know really how you get rid of that, because that's the base minimum tax rate in Josephine County. We're the lowest in the state, one of the lowest in the nation. But all of that gets eaten up, and no dime of it goes to law enforcement or public safety or whatever I would assume the citizens would say. What's your highest priority? What do you want your tax money to be going pay?
Right.
You know what? Most people don't know. That's your main tax bill doesn't pay for any of that. It pays for tax, it pays for assessment, and a couple other things. Planning. They just hired these people in planning. Most of that, if it's not paid for by the fees of developers, it's subsidized by the general fund. But what I understand going through this last budget process, there is nothing left over after that 58 cents. It's about $5.8 million. A penny equals 100,000. There's nothing left to fund law enforcement, which is not, I wouldn't say it would be how the citizens would divide up the pie and say, hey, well, let's just give 75% to law enforcement and we'll deal with whatever's next. The state says you have to do assessment to a degree. We have to do taxation for all the districts, including the county. But we don't have to fund planning to that same, and there's probably efficiencies in tax and assessment. But I think, this gentleman that I'm running against, he inherited this program. I don't feel like my experience to the board, I don't want to say anything negative about the guy. My experience on the county level says that there's different ways to do things, and we need to explore those. There's 36 counties in Oregon, and there's 36 different ways to do these things. And is there a better way to do it? I don't know, but I bet they're not even asking that question right now. Well, and that's what I want to get in there and say, hey, this is our tax money right here. Is it absolutely necessary to do it this way? There's a lot of stuff with AI these days.
And there are legitimate questions to make, because I was just watching a video here today. There's a guy up in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, that goes around making homeless videos. Mm-hmm. And he was talking to a homeless guy saying, hey, did you know that last year, per capita, they were spending $97,000 per person on facilitating services for you? And the homeless guy's like stunned. Yeah. The most he's ever got, he quantified maybe it adds up to $50. They gave me hamburgers a couple of times or whatever.
Right.
But
where's that money going?
But that's how government thinks about spending your money.
Well, they do the same thing with kids. So we're supposed to be we're in the top 10 maybe in the nation. I don't know.
Right. In terms of, you're talking
per capita
about
student spending.
That's right.
And stuff. Yes. And if we just spent more, we probably had better returns, better test scores or whatever from our students.
Not in my life experience. I've seen cost per student go up many, many times. Never seen a better product come out.
The example that I always draw on from when I was in 2012 having to making these decisions, and I say me, if I'll refer to that, it's because Don Reedy and Harold Haugen were great men, but they were appointed, and they didn't steer the ship. I steered the ship as the commissioner who was elected, and they helped guide me, and they did a great job of that. And so in 2012, when we had to do what we had to do to make ends meet, like the fairgrounds and the parks, those were both operating in a 3-year deficit. Doreen Ferguson, the previous parks director, she was great when we had resources. When we didn't, she didn't know how to do the park system with fewer staff. And when she left us and I hired Sarah Garceau, she didn't know any better. She'd never managed a park program in her life. She's young. She just was a go-getter. And instead of having, say, for instance, Doreen had 23 staff, I said, Sarah, you only have 9. She didn't know any different, and she made it happen. And I'm not saying that's better, but you kind of got to make do with what we have.
I'll say it's better.
Or you start shutting stuff down. And we started charging for, $5 for parks access fee, for a parking fee.
Right.
And, because it doesn't get a dime of general fund money.
Okay.
You can't.
Okay. But let me ask you, because every single space in every one of these parks is booked the whole tourist season.
Josephine County Park System?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so obviously
They're doing fine now.
Okay.
When I left office, Sarah, she had $800,000 in her capital reserve. I can get into the weeds on how we acquired that. Her was never in a deficit. She had hired more staff. She'd employed a new program to doing park reserves. They'd moved their offices. They'd introduced, I think there was a veterans program at that time in the parks program, although this last board was talking about it too. And I was like, I thought we did that. There was a bunch of things that she did to make it more efficient. She marketed better. And yeah, it's packed. It's booming. And she gets a lot of that credit. Like I just hire these people and get out of the way. It's like, these are the expectations.
But the question is, if all that money's coming in, why does it matter what level of taxation money they're getting?
Well, they're not benefiting from the taxes at all. They don't get a dime of general fund money.
No, I understand. But if they're earning the money, if the money is coming in, it's self-supporting, why would a hit be taken?
Oh, right. That program didn't get hit.
Yeah.
That program and like, because it was
But you were
funded.
saying the gal that was running the parks didn't know how to do it.
Because they did
with it.
prior to me coming in, they were getting general fund money. The fair was getting general fund money. The public health was getting general fund money, and I turned all that off. I said, no, our priority is law enforcement, public safety. Those are the number ones. And so actually, I think I inherited the element of, like, there were tier 1 priorities, tier 2, or service level 1, service level 2 types of, if we have the funding, you can have some help, but if we don't have it, you aren't getting it. And so, those were non-general fund programs of fair, parks, and public health. I'm not going to have any, it sounds like I'm running for county commissioner. No, I've already done that. I've been there, and I want to help. The whole element of this, if anybody thinks that there's a bang for the buck of doing this for myself and the lashes that you take on social media or anything else, there is no return that I could be doing for my own benefit.
I get that.
It's all about just...
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Because, I'm seeing this stuff on social media, and there's a lot of people thinking, and here's what they think. They think, Chad, John West, somehow you guys are going to be colluding, and there's going to be, all of your good buddies are going to benefit from this whole thing.
Right.
And in fact, I talked to John West about this the other day, and he says it cost him money.
Yeah.
To be in the commissioner position.
Right.
And I'm trying to add it up, and he was talking also about the situation where you came in on a grant to write a grant for it was broadband services or something
I was
that.
to facilitate. There was a federal grant. Yeah, I was just I took over for John McCafferty, who was our previous IT director, and I think he selected. Somehow they came up with me. I knew the broadband issue, and I worked on it when I was in D.C. as part of the, I think it was part of the Farm Bill. Anyway, I've had a history with broadband, and I knew all the players, and so I think there was a $1,500 a month contract to do that, to facilitate it on behalf of the state. But
he said $1,600.
It probably was.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything that you're going to go
it's not
cash
substantial.
In on.
Right.
Right.
So the bottom line is I want people, when they say that, draw me a diagram. Show me what's happening here, because
show me who's getting rich.
I want to see this, because it's very easy to, in flippant conversation with a friend, you go, such and such is doing such and such, and you don't really know what you're talking about.
Well,
I've done that.
I've got that about the budget officer position. It's like, well, what makes you qualified? What makes anybody else more qualified? Like, I appropriated $1 billion under this situation, and that's just the money that comes in. It's not like I wanted to spend $1 billion. It's just that's what we were dealing with. There is no one else in Josephine County who did that, who has done that. There just isn't. So, there isn't a large pool of people to draw on with the experience that I have. There is no one. There's not Herman. There's not any past commissioner. Dan DeYoung didn't serve out his full 8 years. But I would go toe to toe with Dan on the budget about any subject in the county. Let's go. Like I know it better than anybody else. So who else was there to call? And it wasn't the $25,000. People say that I didn't do my job. I was there for 6 or 7 weeks. You don't know what I did. The budget was basically done by the time I resigned. There's an element in the contract. I don't even know if I should be getting into this because there's probably pending litigation, but I really don't care. It's just $25,000. It's not about the money. Cost benefit analysis to me, if I was making that decision of the contract that I saw was coming down the pike, and the $388,000, it was $254 was what was presented to me in those budgets, and I said I can't be a part of this. It's Section 8 of my contract says a misuse of funds, which I deemed it to be, and I think the citizens would too. I think I saved the county whatever the math is, $25,000 minus $388 in 1 year. I think that's a pretty good return on the investment of taxpayer funds saved without having a multi-year, potentially $1 million contract.
Right.
That seems like a no-brainer. And I would say I probably accomplished 90% of preparation of the budget, which is what the contract called for. What I didn't do is I didn't lead the board and the budget committee through the final process. And I guess I'm going to tell you, I am willing to do that for this board. If they're so interested in getting the full measure of the $25,000, I would be happy to come do it. Just whatever you guys want to help consult on the preparation of this budget, because
and that's coming up in May.
Well, they should be doing it right now.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the budget preparation. I think I was doing it in April of last year and stuff. But you could start a budget in January. That's the preparations for citing the internal service fund rate. They probably are picking 10%. I think it should be closer to 8%. There's no reason why we need to be levying the forestry program and parks and fairgrounds. 10% of your revenues go to fund the legal, the HR, the finance, the board's office. It's like, really? They're not using 10%. If they have $1 million budget, you're paying right off the top, $100,000 goes away from your operating budget to pay for those services?
Yeah.
I don't think you're getting the bang for the buck on that.
I've always found that to be a little bit weird.
It's a revenue generator of grants. The reason they pick 10% is because, I'm going to be a transparent absolutist. This is the truth. They pick 10% because that's what most grants allow you to assess their grant, up to 10% for admin. And so they don't feel like they're negatively impacting those programs, but they really are. Like forestry, I think paid over 100,000 couple. I don't know what it was, a lot.
Yeah.
And it was like,
because that's a big budget.
And you talk to Dave, and he's only got 4 employees.
Right.
And they've been there for a while. So we're not using HR. Why are we doing it with finance? It's not very much. The board's office, maybe they see 1 or 2 contracts a year out of forestry.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, we're paying how much for what? Doesn't make any sense.
And that money, just so people understand, is that gets used at the discretion of the Board of Commissioners, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It funds the board's office, IT, finance, and HR.
Okay,
and legal.
So here, let's lay this out again, just so everybody understands. If they pass a levy, 10% of whatever that levy is goes to the Board of Commissioners.
Well, it goes to fund those programs, and the Board of Commissioners is one of that. One of those programs. That's about $650,000.
Right, but that's these other things outside of the intended use, which is, let's say, law enforcement.
The support programs, basically.
Theoretically, but that's happening on a number of different things. I mean, you said yourself we have 14 districts.
Yeah. No, that's like the school district. We don't appropriate.
Okay,
we don't levy against that.
Right. Okay. So, but for a lot of other things, there's a piece of that going. There's 10% of that. That's precisely that piece is going to the commissioner's office to be.
It's way higher. It's higher. I wouldn't say it's way, but it's higher than it was when I was there. I think 8% is probably more reasonable. It doesn't sound like much, but we're talking about a lot of money. It's just making that 2% difference.
Is there any sort of incentive or motivation to make sure that you spend all of that money? Because we're talking about an annual thing, aren't we?
Oh, yeah. It's assessed annually on the budget. But those were the programs that I was waiting on. That's why those were the last budgets to come in, the ISF budgets. And so it just to say that I was done with preparing the budget. I'd been waiting for those for 3 weeks to finish finalizing the budget. So when they say I didn't do anything, I was there almost every day, for quite a bit of the day, and working with every program to finalize the budget, and those were the last ones to come in. That's when I discovered that big position.
So where
people spout off and they just don't know. They have no idea. Like, how could you say that I didn't? How would you know?
Yeah. I don't know. And, because I'm not on the inside of this either. What do you suppose the motivation was, and from whence did it come? This story that was in the Courier saying, we want our money back.
Well, I really appreciate them reaching out for me for my side of the story, and I don't know how much I should say. I probably already said too much, but the element of litigation affords me the opportunity for discovery. So I'm not saying I'm looking for it, but it'll be really interesting to see, because then I'd get access to whether or not there was actually a contract. So go ahead. Yeah, that'll validate everything I'm saying if I'm given the opportunity through litigation for discovery.
So you don't.
But I think this is all political. I think it's politics. What are we talking about here?
Okay.
It's $25,000. I really did 90% of the work.
Are you okay? So it's politics.
I think it is, but I don't really.
I mean, is there a target here that you think that this is coming from?
Well, I
What's
think the county
source
clearly
of
doesn't
this?
want somebody who knows what questions to ask to be in the courthouse. That was the rationale that I think is the only rationale for why. And I talked about Gary Richardson's a nice guy, but he lost. He's never been to a general. Like, he's never gone to November pursuing a commissioner's race. He's never been there. I've never lost. I was never recalled. There was a petition filed, but it got no signatures, under 300, say. I don't even know. But you take 6,000 or 7,000, didn't even get hardly anything of that, 10%. So I'm in good standing. I had my personal issue, but at the end of the day, that was over 10 years ago. And the thing about it is, I know the questions to ask. There is no one who can say something in there who's gonna say something that if it's not right, I'm gonna figure it out. So I don't think they want that in the courthouse. They don't want a person who knows the questions to ask.
Why?
I don't know. I mean, I think they do something wrong almost every day. Like, every agenda that doesn't have the backup information, everything that they use to deliberate towards a decision is public information for the citizens to see before the board makes a decision. I think it's outrageous that they raise the fees for the solid waste franchises and didn't clearly lay out what the options were, and we picked option A, and to do that without taking any public comment. It's wild to me that we delegate this Board of County Commissioners to oversee a monopoly in our town with the sole authority to regulate this thing. It's not private sector. It's owned by a private company, but it doesn't have there's no capacity for competition. It's against the law. Same thing with AMR, or ambulance service agreement. You can't compete by providing one. We got into that when there was air ambulance service.
Oh, right.
And, back in the day. And I don't even remember how that was resolved, but it's pretty important. We delegated the board to do that. And then they just unilaterally, without public comment, word one, raise these fees. Now, that might be appropriate. I don't know. But you have to have a conversation with the people you're doing it and acting on behalf of.
Yeah, well, I question the appropriateness of putting a portion of that on people who are not. I was under the impression that they were raising the rate at the Kirby landfill, which means that if I'm driving in there with a pickup truck full of garbage, it's going to cost me more than it did before. What is the rationale for, putting that on everyone who's an SOS subscriber? In other words, the people that are not even anywhere near that area, maybe in Merlin or Sunny Valley or whatever.
I really didn't follow it. I didn't follow it at all. I probably should have, because the Solid Waste Agency is sitting on $2 million of resources that are supposed to be used to remediate the uncared for along the side of a road or in public lands. Those are what those funds are supposed to be used for, and they're just sitting on them. And that could have so if the rationale is to distribute the fee schedule over everybody, because there would be an increase in dumping if you just put the fee increase on Kirby. So there'd be a certain percentage of people who said, I'm not going to pay it.
Yeah, right.
I'm just going to go down the road and dump it. And then everybody would have to pay for that remediation. So you might as well assess a higher fee on everybody else, because they're going to have to pay for it anyway, so that impact doesn't happen. Those people, that percentage of population that chooses not to because of the increased price, you can't price them out of the market, because then everybody's going to have to pay for it anyway.
Right.
That rationale, I don't even know if it was explained, but the solution could have been that the Solid Waste Agency uses a little bit of their money to backfill that fee increase,
right,
and you don't have a fee increase at all.
Right.
So I don't know. I wasn't part of the discussion.
Well, if the solid waste
and I'm pretty sure this board doesn't understand the situation to the degree that they probably should to have been making that decision. And I think there could have been input from the public that maybe would have helped them.
Maybe. If the solid waste, I don't know what to call it, agency or the fund, if there's money there to backfill, to keep people from dumping garbage or to clean up when people dump garbage. And from what I understand, the road out to Kirby landfill from the highway is, trashed out big time. It's
been cleaned up. That Motherline organization, who's incredible.
Right. But that's being done by private people. That's not being paid for by the solid waste fund, is it?
I don't know if the dump fees were covered by that or how they were covered. They should have been covered by that.
Right.
That's what Chad and I were putting together with the idea. Chad Hansen, who's running for county commissioner position 2, who I'm supporting. He and I came up with really basically redoing what was called the Clean Forest Initiative that sunsetted in 2015. It used to get paid for out of Title III funds, and those are federal road. They're road dollars. They're dollars that are appropriated based on the miles of federal roads in your county, and it's part of Secure Rural Schools. And that appropriation, there's Title I, Title II, and Title III. Title I is what we get to pay for county services. That's the bulk majority. And then the county, oh gosh, sorry, Mike. It gets so complicated.
I know. So,
but that sunsetted when those dollars went away.
The Secure Rural Schools.
But the problem didn't go away.
Right.
And so, but the Solid Waste Agency sitting on this boatload of cash that could be used for that program. And Chad's like, well, why don't we just do it? I mean, he's just a guy who goes and does stuff.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, totally could. You could start this organization and they could use those funds.
And so this organization that you guys were going to start, is this the
It's not Patriot Solutions. Chad liked it called 1642 because we have 1,642 square miles in Josephine County.
Yeah, he mentioned that in the interview that I did with him. It's just that, these elements come in and I try to keep them straight.
What Chad's really good at is we explore. He says there's a problem. And then I here's the pieces that could possibly solve that problem. And then he's like, well, let's just do it, and give it a try. Try it for a year to where there's a central organization countywide that would be able to outline all of the problems. There's a problem in your neighborhood. There's a problem down the street. There's a problem up Grayback. There's a problem this way. And we put them dots on a map, and then we organize volunteers and get into the schools and recruit kids. And, maybe we kick them a couple of bucks for their Little League program or whatever.
And if you can find some government money that we should be getting from cutting timber, but we're not getting now because nobody is pursuing those grants, then why not?
That funding stream is no longer, it's not available right now. And why? I mean, there are so much potential. And so the vilification of these people who are willing to put their hand in the air and say, "Hey, I'll do it. Let me take a crack at it."
Right.
It's wild how people are so they got nothing but too much free time. In my opinion.
I venture a guess that some of these people are not out there on a Saturday picking up garbage themselves.
No,
probably
they're
not.
Yeah. There's 100. We spend so much time bickering about these things, and there's probably 50 different deals that we should be working on to make our county better. And when you look around, Josephine County is kind of an anomaly. You don't have these problems in Douglas County and other counties. Their commissioners are working really hard. They're doing a good job. And, I don't know what it is, but we've just been recycling them through. I served with 8 different commissioners in 8 years. In other counties, that is wild. And there's no longevity. There's no understanding of, like, you get in there, you learn a little bit. But Harold Haugen used to talk about, he's our longest serving county commissioner, and I served with him for 1 year. He'd say, what, most commissioners, they spend all of their time fixing potholes on roads that maybe we shouldn't even, we don't use anymore and stuff. There's miles of roads in Josephine County, as that example, that we should divest from our portfolio and turn over to the private sector. I can think of 2 right off the bat. It's Suncrest Road out in O'Brien that serves 1 person, and the same thing with QBRX. It's about a half a mile road that only serves QBRX. And they have been petitioning the county for years. Why are you guys we stripe it? We just replaced a stop sign out there. All of this stuff, and we shouldn't even be maintaining it. It's wild. They want it. The county wants it. Get rid of it. Divest it.
Right.
So,
yeah, this is why you have to have people that are caring about the bottom line. And it's very difficult to care about the bottom line when you're just a guy who's out there, tarring up the cracks or something.
I always looked at it as though I was spending my money, and probably to a fault. Like I can remember a piece of equipment we bought out at the fairgrounds, and I was cheap. And I said, why don't we just go look at auctions? And we sent our fair manager, and he didn't know what he was doing about buying a piece of equipment. And I don't think it worked out that well. Sometimes you err, but man, we are sitting on $10 million of equipment out at Public Works. And I would imagine that if you do the math, it sits there for most of the year. We just, is that the best bang for the buck, having all of that equipment just sit there? And I don't know. There's 100 different things. We had a situation with Dan DeYoung and Lily Morgan first got in there, and I, as the chair, you get to make the decisions. At least that's how it was structured, about what kind of renovations these commissioners are going to do to their offices. I renovated mine, and I did it at my expense. All of the new paneling. I don't know who's got that office, but my grandfather milled some of the boards that are the kick plates around the bottom, and my dad and I refinished the desk in my office. And all sorts of stuff at my own expense. But Dan and Lily wanted to do some things, and I approved Dan's, and I didn't approve Lily's. Dan's was basically free. Lily's cost a lot, and I said no to Lily's, and I said yes to Dan's. And it got me into, a little bit of a tiff with Lily, and I think we're past, that's years and years ago. But, man, I'm cheap when it comes to doing stuff. I don't want to do it multiple times. Yeah. And we can't keep making these expenses every time there's a new commissioner coming into the office. It was like, no, just try to make it work. I'll buy you an extension cord. Let's try to solve this as cheaply as possible. And it's not about what that situation. It's the message it sends to every manager.
It's an example
program about the way the board acts when they're spending money. They watch the weekly business session, and they see when there's just turning up the spout and money's flowing out. Don't you know that agenda fills up next week on the Thursday admin or whatever? Let me get into the queue and get some of that cash for my program. And they don't see that. The other thing they don't see is when they hire all these people and the next board comes in here in a year from now and they don't have the money for that program anymore, those good employees that were hired with the expectation they might have a job for a little while, they probably have a spouse or a family member that needs a medical. I think about that when I laid off those 125. Half of those people I knew, and you hire them for a minute and then they're fired the next for no fault of their own. it totally disrupts these people's lives. Every time you hire somebody, you need to think about the fact that you may have to let them go and lay them off. And if you don't have that figured out, that they have 3 years of funding and their job is justified and blah, 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 then don't do it.
Yeah.
It's wrong. It's wrong to set these people up. And you're playing with people's lives. And I hate that. These people have never had to go through what I had to go through. And maybe I have a little bit of post-traumatic stress. But I'm like, you got to think about these things.
Yeah.
It may feel good to hire a bunch of people, but you're not even probably going to be around long enough to have to make the hard decision that maybe we're going to have to let them go because we can't afford it.
So let's tie it back to your running for treasurer, and what do you expect is going to be coming up in the next year or two that is a challenge for that position, and what you're doing as opposed to what the current guy would be doing?
Well, the most challenging stuff is going to take place in the board's office. I think anybody can read the writing on the wall that our federal spending is out of control. And, whether it's direct spending or through Oregon, we're reliant on a lot of that money. And so it's going to be a trickle-down effect. The treasurer has virtually very little to do with that. I'm thinking there's going to be an ancillary benefit to me being in the courthouse and just downstairs, who can be that person who's been there before, who can help shepherd a future board, whoever it is, through this process. If they're receptive to any kind of I'll still probably be the youngest guy in the courthouse, but I'll be, the old guy downstairs who can, who's been there once before.
The term of a treasurer is 4 years.
Yeah. The other thing is that its transparency is number one. There's a potential litigation element that our current treasurer is embroiled in with a financial institution in Josephine County. It's never happened before. It's kind of wild. I don't know why. What's going on?
Is this the evergreen thing?
Yeah,
I'm hearing scuttlebutt about.
Yep. And there's probably 10 different ways to solve this challenge with whatever happened. The way they decided to do it is definitely in the camp of not doing it the right way, in my estimation.
Okay.
I have people that I know at Evergreen. They're not happy about it the way it went down. It puts a bad taste in every other institutions. I'm very close with people at First Community Credit Union, and they will never take a check from the county again and not have it backed up by the actual revenues, the resources, the actual cash in hand at that institution before cashing a Josephine County check. And that'll reverberate for a decade. And so I don't know what those ramifications are. I just know that that's not the solution, the way it was handled. And it's kind of like I hired and fired almost every manager at the county. We have 25 programs, minus Rob Brandis in Public Works, who I thought did a pretty good job most days. And Lisa in Veterans, she was like State Veterans Coordinator of the Year back in the day. She does a good job. And when you start seeing things on the surface that are not done correctly, you start to wonder about how everything else is being done in that office. And without transparency, I just have questions. I don't know, and you won't know until you get in there and you find out, oh my gosh, it's great, or it's a bigger mess than I anticipated. And problems in that office are super expensive. He has to do things by the state statute on a timely basis, and erring, there's big round, and who pays? The taxpayer.
Right.
So that's who I'm looking out for. That's who I always have been and always will be. I'm really passionate about how Josephine County is run. I don't need this job. I want it done well. And it feels like things have not gone well since I left office. I can look at our financial situation should be better than it is. There's no clear vision for where Josephine County should be going, and that's why we basically have been floundering. The element of the economic development funds of the thing in question that we were talking about with Evergreen Federal. If Chad had gotten his approval and been part of the vetting process for those applications. I won't say that that application wouldn't have made it, because I've heard from Kirkpatrick that there is a nuance in the solid waste agency code that allows him to do what he's doing, but it would have been refined. From my standpoint, I don't think economic development dollars should be doing non-traded sector investment. And that sounds a little complicated, but if you're not selling something out of Josephine County, we're just trading dollars inside. You need to be doing a Playcraft of the world. That's what we're going to want to invest in, our economic development dollars, or a Rogue Truck Body or a Taylor Sausage. Both of those, John West gave a $50,000 grant to Taylor Sausage, a $50,000 economic development grant to Rogue Truck Body, because they're traded sector. They're bringing money into our county. They're hiring people. I think there's probably 200 employees between those two programs, those two companies out there. They're bringing money in from outside.
It's literally bang for the buck.
You don't give it to people who are doing. I mean, my neighbor's got a truck and trailer. He could be hauling trash tomorrow if it was allowed. Well, you don't give money to people who are doing that, because you're just trading dollars inside of Josephine County. We want to bring money into the county. It's like starting up another burger joint or something.
Yeah,
we don't do that.
The whole economic development money thing, I have my conflicts on that whole thing. But listen,
it's really a tax on the least among us, those people who play the lottery on a regular basis.
Yes, but it exists.
It exists.
So
technically it's our money, because it's on a percentage basis. I think it's 2.5% is remitted back to the counties, just a measly 2.5% to the counties, who delegated the authority to regulate lottery to the state. It's the Deb Potts Memorial Building up in Salem that houses our lottery program for the state. So, yeah, I don't know. There'll probably be 100 different things that will be hopefully a step forward in improvement in the Treasury and tax collecting program and stuff. I have nothing against this guy personally. In fact, he's really likable. I kind of like him, but I just think it could be done better, and there isn't any evidence on the outside to make me feel good about the way it's being done.
Okay. Well, you will get your opportunity on May 19th.
May 19th, coming up here.
To choose who's going to do what. And there's the current treasurer, and his name is Dustin
Calvo.
Calvo. Okay. Right, yes. Right. I have a hard time.
He doesn't have a lot
names.
Of background. I think self-professed in some Facebook post I saw. He doesn't have a lot of background in finance and stuff like that.
And is there not one other? Is there another that is?
There is. I don't. Alexis, I want to say. I don't know her last name. Yeah,
and I don't know either, and I should probably look into that because talking to all kinds of people. But anyway, on May 19th, you'll have the opportunity to vote for Simon Hare if you so choose.
Please remember to vote.
Treasurer. And there's an upcoming event that is going to be at the Black Bear Diner, and I believe that's this Thursday.
It is,
This Thursday, 12 to 1 or 2 or something like that. Yeah. And there's going to be, I think, Dwayne Yunker's going to be there, and
Chad Hansen.
Chad Hansen.
I'm on it as well.
And Simon Hare. So, again, decision time, May 19th, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thank you very much, Simon Hare, for coming in.
My pleasure, Mike.